let's move on to our final segment of the show, and that is our top three. We'll call it our top three offensive player of the year candidates for the Eagles, right? So excluding Jalen Hurts because right?
Obviously.
And we didn't want to include the offensive line. Why? Because when we did our top 5 most important Eagles in total for this season, we had combined, we had Jalen, Lane, Mailata, and Kelsey. Well, where else are we putting people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So a little bit different. It's skill position only, excluding the O-line and Jalen. And it's not who's most important. It's who do we think has the biggest seasons, right?
Yeah.
Production-wise, numbers, everything like that for this offense, man. At number 3, I'll let you go first. Who do you have at number 3 on your offensive player of the year list?
Yeah, this is this list was tough, man, and I've gone a couple different ways over the last few days when we started thinking about this, but I went with number 3. I went with surprisingly AJ Brown.
Ooh, okay.
And I know this might catch people off guard because AJ Brown, he was probably the best weapon last year. I don't even think you have to put a probably by it, but it's not that I think he's going to take a step back. As we've heard Nick Sirianni talking about AJ, he feels that he's gotten even better, and I do believe they'll have the chemistry between him and Jalen Hurts. That's going to be even better this season. I don't think that's going to die down or become less or any type of regression there. I just think there's other people in this offense that are going to get acclimated and that are going to have how do I put this? A bigger impact on the season. And I guess I'll be able to explain that as we go up the list. And
impact numbers-wise.
Yeah, like the numbers that they put up, maybe AJ Brown has a better season per se, but the impact of the numbers from these other 2 guys on my list have a bigger impact on the offense long-term and throughout the playoffs. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it here. No shade to AJ Brown at all here. AJ Brown does it all. He's going to be a huge part of this offense. He is wide receiver 1. They use him in the screens. They use him on the deep balls. They use him in the intermediate slant routes. They use him everywhere. He's an all-around wide receiver. He can do everything. He's a tank on top of it. And I expect big things from him. I don't expect him to come under 1,000 yards, anything like that. I expect him to have quite a few touchdowns, similar to last year. But just number 3 on my list as far as impact. And it's hard to maneuver around the wording there with AJ Brown, and maybe I'm just overthinking it a little bit too much there. But I think I'll be able to explain it better as we get to 2 and 1.
No, I feel you, man. At number 2, I am going to agree with Hunter here, and I'm going to go with our newly acquired running back, DeAndre Swift. And the reason I don't have him higher is because while we do expect him to be RB1 and be involved in the pass game and everything like that, we still know what Nick Sirianni does with the running back carousel. Yeah. So while I do think he's top 3, and that's why he made the list for me, because I do think he is that difference maker of a weapon that they haven't had in the past. You see the way they're utilizing him in both ways, in the backfield and out of the backfield in training camp so far. I do believe there is a cap to how much he gets the ball this year, because you're still going to have your Rashad Penny. You're still going to have Gainwell. They'll find a way to use Boston Scott at times.
Yeah.
They're going to throw the ball. Jalen, I think he has a huge impact on the offense this year. That's a difference from last year.
Yeah.
But I think it's limited in terms of his total numbers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a fair perspective. Now, DeAndre Swift does come in number 2 on my list here. So he did come in above AJ. Now, once again, this is not to say Swift is going to have more receiving yards than AJ. No. He could have more scrimmage yards, though. He could. I think this is a season where you could see DeAndre Swift with like a 600 rushing yard type season, 600, 700 rushing yards, maybe 400 to 500 receiving yards as well in the passing game. And I think the reason I put him number 2 here is that impact that I'm talking about, and the ability to put him out there on the outside in the slot, put him out there on the outside as a wide receiver, put him in the backfield, right, with another running back maybe. You have so many different variations that you can use DeAndre Swift in this offense, and it is a completely new aspect to the offense, because to your point, they just didn't throw it to the running backs last year. That was just not a focal point of this offense. I think that changes a lot this year. I think they get the running backs involved, and not just Swift. I think they get all of the running backs involved in the passing game a little bit more this year. But to be fair to your point, I think you make a very good point. It could very well be capped, and ultimately that could lead to A.J. Brown having the better season.
Mm-hmm.
So just to put that in perspective, I can agree with you there.
At number 2, I have Dallas Goedert. And I have Goddard here at 2 because he missed some time last year, and you saw the impact it had on this offense at times. Yeah. You saw, Grant Calcaterra, I know they brought in Dan Arnold, Jack Stoll, right? When he actually called a pass versus New Orleans, we were like, holy shit, Jack Stoll just called a pass over the middle. He ran a route. The drop off in the tight end room, when you're talking about Dallas Goedert, a top 5 tight end in the league, can block, can run great routes, has great hands, big physical body, yards after the catch, everything.
Yeah.
And then you take him off the field and you see the offense struggle, right? And here's why I have him at number 2. He said the other day, a goal for him, a goal since he's in the league, is to get over 1,000 yards and still have AJ and Smitty. Maybe we can all go over 1,000, right? Because the Eagles finally had 2,000-yard receivers plus 1,000-yard rusher last year.
Right.
Maybe we can get the trio to get 1,000 plus this year, right? He's got to stay healthy for that to happen.
That's the key.
I think you saw him in the Super Bowl kind of be that security blanket for Jalen on third down, man. I feel like I watched a handful of big third down catches. We all know the one at the sideline that got reviewed and he ended up getting his foot down. I think he can, man. I think he can get there. And I want to go back to this man for 1 second, okay? Yeah. I think he helps Dallas Goedert in a weird way. I think he opens up the middle of the field even more for Dallas Goedert with his pass catching ability, his explosiveness out of the backfield, up the gut in a weird with all those RPO actions they run. If you have to account for let's say DeAndre Swift breaks off a run up the gut off of a draw or something, right, for 20 yards or plus, right? Well, then the next play, if I have Goddard on the edge of the line or in the slot, and I'm going to fake that RPO action. Well, now the middle of the field, they come down because now I got to worry about DeAndre Swift's ass coming up the middle again. So in a weird way, you already have Smitty and AJ outside. That opens up the field enough. Jalen's legs open up the field. DeAndre Swift as a weapon can open up the middle of the field for Dallas Goedert even more. I think he goes over 1,000 yards this year. And again, AJ might have 1,500 yards. That's more statistically than Dallas Goedert. But I think it could mean a bigger impact, to your point earlier.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at with this list. And I think you make a great point with DeAndre Swift kind of taking some attention away from the middle of the field for Dallas Goedert per se, right? Because now teams are going to have to decide when DeAndre Swift, say, he lines up on the right side of Jalen, and then you have Dallas Goedert right there on the edge of the offensive line as the tight end on the right side. Well, the middle of the field, the linebackers, the safeties, they're going to have to make decisions. And there's going to be safety attention that's going to have to be attached to DeAndre Swift because linebackers aren't going to be able to guard him when he's in the slot, different things like that. So to your point, that is a very good point. I do think that he's going to help him a ton. And I actually do have Goddard at the top of my list. Okay. No shade to Smitty, right? Smitty's not on my list and took a lot of thinking there because there's part of me that feels like Smitty, not because he's better than AJ. He could just have a better season, right? Like you could get more targets, maybe more attentions on AJ. He gets more open. Smitty is a very big honorable mention for me in this top 3 group. And I think that's why we did top 3, right? Because it's easy. You could just put Smitty in the top 5 and then boom, you're good. You have all of them covered. You have to make choices here. And ultimately, Smitty came out with the short end of the stick. But Goddard is the number 1 for me, to a lot of the points that you already made regarding him. And I would just go to say, I think the chemistry with him and Hurts should be a lot better this year. I think the utilization is where I think it's key for Dallas Goedert, because last year he only had, three receiving touchdowns last year? Yeah. For a big target like that, that's not enough, right? And the ball got spread around things. They've rushed the ball in with QB sneaks a lot. Jalen had 13 rushing touchdowns. But I think a lot of that kind of shifts this year. And maybe you don't run your quarterback as much in the red zone to get him hit after you paid him millions, right? And maybe some of those red zone targets go to the big tight end right? The big target in the red zone there for you. So I think that's one way he can make a bigger impact this season is in the red zone. And then just staying healthy, to your point. I think if he plays all of the games last year, if he plays 17 games last year, he probably does get 1,000 yards. Like, I know we can sit here and like calculate and prorate his stats, and we don't have to do that, right? Maybe he takes a fall anyways and doesn't get as much production, but 702 yards in 12 games, right? So he has 5 other games that he could have production in that could have very well got him 300 more yards.
Yeah.
To that point, man, I think he's very close to eclipsing that 1,000 yard marker. And I think that Goddard eclipsing 1,000 yards and maybe getting 5 to 8 touchdowns receiving is bigger than AJ Brown eclipsing 1,000 yards, right? And getting his numbers, because AJ Brown is supposed to do that right now.
Right.
If Dallas Goedert comes out and hits these projections that we have right now, then this team is going to be freaking soaring. Or somebody got injured, which, knock on wood, that's what you hope is not the case. But if Dallas Goedert eclipses 1,000 yards, man, it's going to be a wrap. It's one of the best offenses in the NFL.
At number 1, I do have AJ Brown. And again, I feel bad leaving Smitty off this list, but we trimmed it to 3 because we had it set. The title literally was top 5. And I'm texting back and forth with you, and I go, dude, if we go 5, no shit. You're going to go Smitty, AJ, Goddard, Swift, and let's pick another, for God's sake.
Pick somebody else. Yeah.
Right? So it was too easy to do that, right? So when you limit to 3, someone's left out, and that is Devontae Smith for me. Here's why AJ Brown's number 1. For all the points you laid out. The numbers are going to be there. Like we expect him to go over 1,000 yards. Hell, we might expect him to go over 1,400 yards again.
Maybe I'm taking him for granted.
7, 8+ touchdowns. He had double-digit touchdowns last year. Everything involved, the skill, as you mentioned, the relationship with Jalen, Sirianni talking about how he looks even better in year 2 here in Philadelphia. You expect the production to be there. But here's why he's my offensive player of the year for the Eagles and kind of the most important, right? How do the numbers stack up?
Yeah.
I mean this in no disrespect to my man Dallas Goedert, who I put at 2. No disrespect to Devontae Smith. Anybody. To me, and I love Smitty, man. Smitty's probably a top 15 wide receiver. He might be the best number 2 wide receiver in the league.
We'll figure it out this week.
AJ Brown is the one guy they can't afford to lose. And he's also the one guy, if you lost the other 2, I still think you could stay afloat with him. That's the difference to me. I'm not saying Devontae Smith isn't great. And again, that was 2 years ago. That was both their rookie years, so it's hard to compare, but we've seen wide receiver 1 with Devontae Smith and Jalen. He didn't even get the ball in the first half of a playoff game. Again, 2 years ago, rookie year, I get that.
Yeah.
We've seen life without Dallas Goedert. It's not fun, it's not pretty, but they can survive. To me, if you take AJ Brown off this field, you're hurting. And if you keep him on the field and you don't have Devontae Smith, or you don't have Smith and Swift, or whatever the combination of guys you're missing, I think AJ Brown is that great and that dominant that him and Jalen and the others can survive and still find ways to win games, in that just the Devontae Smith and Quez Watkins core isn't getting done. That's why I think he's the most important, because I think he's just flat out the most dominant skill position player this team has.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's a fair way to put it, man. There's part of me that wonders if, what it would look like with Dallas Goedert and Smitty just being like the main targets with this new improved Jalen Hurts, mind you. But no, I can't disagree. We see the impact that AJ Brown has had on this team as soon as he got here last year in his first season. So turn this team into a Super Bowl contender instantly. And, a lot of it is you got to throw some respect to Jalen for improving, but obvious part of that is bringing AJ in. The attention, even if he's a decoy, sometimes we saw that in the playoff game against the Giants, I believe it was.
Right.
He's a decoy in that game, and it opens up things for other guys. So to your point, maybe